Well, hello everybody, welcome to Red Tool House. On today's video, I want to talk about owner financing. Should you consider owner financing as a viable option to move forward with your homestead or farming land purchase? So I'm not sure many people know about it, so let's talk about it and the pros and cons of it. And while we're talking about it, I'm going to plant a plum tree, so I promise it won't bog you down. It'll just keep me from being a talking head. You ready? So while banks are the most common form, the most obvious way of financing property or a house or whatever you're trying to make a large purchase of, it's not always an option when it comes to raw land or lower priced land, those type of things that are more obscure. Oh, there's a rock. Because sometimes it just doesn't fit their cookie cutter. You know, banks want specific, you want the rock? Banks want specific things to go in their portfolio, and raw land usually isn't one of those. Mainly because it's just not a big enough expense. You know, if you think about buying like this piece of property, $55,000 piece of property, and financing it, the juice is hardly worth the squeeze for the bank to do all that paperwork and the finance rates they're going to get from it. And sometimes buyers may have a credit issue where they can't get traditional financing from a bank because their credit score is either non-existent, because they've been staying out of debt, doing all the things you're supposed to, and trying to be cash only, but that affects a credit score, so a bank's not going to play ball with them. So owner financing may be the logical step to remove the hurdles that the bank's going to create and dealing with this this raw land that banks will stay away from. So I think we obviously need to talk about what is owner financing. So let's define that real quick before we move on. So owner financing is pretty much what it sounds like. It's where the owner or the seller of the property decides to act as the bank and finance the land on your behalf. You're not sitting on my tree, are you? So how does owner financing work? The first step, of course, is discussing with the owner if they're going to be willing to do owner financing. They may not be posting that. They may not be advertising that. That may be your call to bring that up. So if the owner agrees to do owner financing, then of course a sale price is determined. And a land contract is drafted, basically saying, hey, yes, I agree to buy this land for this price. So once that contract is signed, a down payment is determined, and as well as the interest rate, the amortization schedule, all of those type of things are determined and usually drafted in a promissory note that will be a contract between you, the buyer, and the seller. Once that is recorded, then usually the down payment is given and you can take possession of your property. Now there's a lot of variables that go into that, but that's the nuts and bolts of it. So what are some of the pros to owner financing? Well, as I mentioned before, it could get you around some of the restrictions that a bank's going to put on because of the type of property dealing you're working with there. It can also help overcome credit issues. So you don't necessarily have to have a credit check. That's up to the seller at that point, but it can keep you from having to have your credit pulled. So if you had a credit issue, or if you just want to avoid having your credit pulled, then that can be negotiated as well. It also gives the opportunity to remove the middleman. You know, the bank in this situation is the middleman, and with that comes a whole lot of restrictions, stipulations, fees, delays, all the stuff that comes along with all that bureaucracy. Usually your closing costs are going to be cheaper as well. Again, by eliminating the middleman, you're not going to have a lot of those things. You're just going to have some basic legal fees, some filing fees, and all that kind of stuff. You could possibly even end up with lower interest rates depending on what's negotiated. It may be that the property owner is only looking for a certain percentage and not messing with the prime plus 2 or whatever's going on this day and age. And you could even negotiate a fixed rate instead of a variable rate. It also gives you a lot of freedom to negotiate options such as the down payment or the amortization schedule. How long till payoff? I mean, you can do some really interesting things there. You could say, well, I want to pay this off in 12 months, 24 months, 28 months, 26 months, whatever, and negotiate that with the seller. So as with everything, there are cons to owner financing. And probably the biggest one is the fact that this is not going to be a long-term financing goal. Most people that are going to owner finance their property are not going to agree to do it for a 20 or 30-year loan. So you're going to be dealing with a quicker payoff. And that shorter term, of course, is going to require larger monthly payments or a larger down payment. So it's going to require you to do things faster and more expensive per month. Also, there's not an opportunity to build credit in this situation. So if you're trying to develop a credit score, this is not something that's going to get filed on your credit report. There's also a little increased opportunity for shenanigans to go on in this situation. And by that, I just mean, if somebody's got a racket where they're taking a rural piece of land and they're trying to owner finance it, and they're just trying to find some sap out there because there's something wrong with the land, or they've got 5 guys doing owner financing at the same time, there's just that opportunity because, of course, there's not the financial institution to back it up. And we'll get into how to avoid those type of things here in a second. You watch out for things like, oh yeah, you're the 3rd guy that's tried to buy this land from me, and hopefully you'll have better luck than they did. Yeah, that's one of those red flags. There can be a little bit of a negative stigma when it comes to requesting owner finance. I may think, oh, wait a minute, what's wrong with this person? If they want me to finance this, the bank must not like them at all. And another con is that land that you may be looking at may not be available for owner financing. So like land that's listed with a real estate agent. Let's say you've been on the MLS and you've looked at some of these larger MLS services. Most likely they're not going to play ball with for owner financing. That's where you need to look for the for sale by owner type properties on other channels. So if you're thinking about exploring owner financing, I want to give you a list of things to consider or things to watch out for. And the first and foremost of those, first thing to consider is hiring a good lawyer. A good lawyer is going to be worth the effort. And you'll be surprised, the fees are not going to be super expensive. But hire a lawyer that has this experience, who's worked with owner financing, who at least does deed and title work and has some experience in that area. We're not trying to get a trial attorney here or a good divorce lawyer. We just want somebody who knows how to file these things and help draft some of the contracts. Along those same lines, if the seller says, hey, I've got a good lawyer, he can take care of all this for us, he'll draft everything, say, thank you, but I'm going to have my lawyer look over it as well. Obviously, be sure you can afford the monthly payments. Since this is most likely going to be a higher monthly expense, since it's going to be a shorter term, you want to make sure you're able to afford the prices that are going to be set. It's kind of a no-brainer, but don't get yourself upside down in something. Also, make sure to review all the details of the promissory note. This is where the shenanigans come into play. And it's not only just the monthly payments, the interest rate, the amortization schedule, but what about default? What happens if you have to default? Or if you're late on a payment, what happens there? Because just like a bank that would be covering things, if there's foreclosure, the seller's going to take the property back because you haven't paid, then it's just like a bank at that point. Also look for late payment triggers, not just defaults, but if there is a late payment, what happens? Does your interest rate go up? Also, make sure the seller has an understanding of the infrastructure improvements you plan to do, if any, during the financing period. Because some may not allow you to do that. Some may say, hey, wait a minute, we got to wait till it's paid off before you can start building a bunch of stuff, because I don't want to have to clean up your mess should you default. Also, just do the math on the monthly payments. Make sure there's no balloon payment at the end that the seller's put in there to say, hey, your monthly payments are going to be low, and when we're done in 7 years, you'll have to figure out a way to come up with another 20 grand. You see that in construction loans all the time with banks. They usually have a balloon payment. That's how we did ours 23 years ago. Well, as I mentioned before, land that's most likely going to be an option for owner financing isn't going to be on the big MLS servers. Isn't going to have the big real estate agents listed or anything like that. That's a big rock. You don't want to catch this one. Okay, maybe you do. So you're going to have to get familiar with some of these less obvious listings. So whether it's Facebook Marketplace, whether it's Craigslist, whether it's an old print ad bulletin or classifieds in your area, if that still exists, then be ready to look for those things. And keep in mind, if you find an awesome piece of land that everybody's going to want as soon as they find out it's out there and the price is right, but you need the owner financing, that owner may not do that. The downside for the seller on owner financing, he doesn't get his cash all at once. If he was using a traditional, or if you were using traditional banking methods, then he would get all of his cash at closing. So owner financing may be a great way for you to speed up your dream of living on a homestead or on some raw land to build something non-traditional. And owner financing may be able to speed that up a little bit, 5 or 10 years, based upon how you're able to save money. It could also eliminate a lot of the middleman, the paperwork, the fees, a lot of the foolishness that goes along with the banks. So if you're looking at land and you find something for sale by owner, ask them if they would consider doing owner financing. It may allow you to kickstart your dream and get your land sooner. Well, comment below and let me know what your experiences are with owner financing if you have any. And I pray you all have a great week. Take care. Timber, you ready to head to the house and get a drink? Mr. Panties? Mr. Dog Pants? Well, let's load up. Come on. Get in there. No, I'm driving. Move over. You drove last time. I don't need your hot face on mine. Thank you. Hold on, Fuzzy.